You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say and can will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have the present with you while you're being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any questionings if you wish. All right. You good, dude?
Good Monday morning. It is 8 o'clock on Monday, October 21st, Central Time. Hanging out with me, Hio Sonder Firelight for the morning. We are back for the second day of the Sarah Boone trial. And the Sarah Boone trial, I'm going to be right back. Let's do that right there. The Sarah Boone trial centers around the death of her boyfriend, George Torres Jr., who passed after being trapped in the Suitcase in 2020. Boone claims that they were playing a game of hide and seek while intoxicated, and she zipped Torres into the suitcase, later falling asleep and forgetting about him when she woke. Torres passed away from asphyxiation. The key developments in the trial so far have been the video evidence. Boone filmed parts of the incident, including footage where Torres can be heard pleading to be let out of the suitcase while Boone was mocking him. That's been the center to the prosecution's case. Boone's defense argues that this was a tragic accident with no intent to harm. They emphasize that Boone's emotional distress and her immediate called to 911 after finding Torres unresponsive. Prosecution is focusing on Boone's behavior, including the disturbing video claiming that her actions were intentional and cruel. Recent updates have included Boone's behavior in the courtroom, where she made unusual requests, like snacks, during the proceedings, which drew a lot of public attention. And the trial's ongoing. The defense is attempting to cast doubt on Boone's intent, while the prosecution is going to be arguing for her culpability in Torres's death. And so that's what we are going to be going over this morning. I think in the meantime, see if there's anybody see if court TV is actually in the courtroom looking around here. Hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. Never long enough. Never ever long enough. Okay, so they're still focusing on the seal. It doesn't look like Sarah has made it into court yet. See if we can just get a brief synopsis here on a little summary. Good morning. The opening statements were really hard to hear. We were all here for that. It was not easy to understand what was going on, but definitely looking forward to today. I don't know why. It doesn't feel like it's going to be like necessarily pivotal or anything, but it's just kind of I don't know. It's like the meat and potatoes, you know. Let's go. Let's get going. Um, let's see. Did anybody do a weekend synopsis? Let's do this. Apparently we can't get the volume to work. Let's see if we. Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. I couldn't. For some reason, it just was not happening. Let's go over Vinnie Politan talking about what this case is about here, in case anybody needs a refresher.
2020, Sarah Boone and her boyfriend George Torres were spending an evening together at Sarah's home. The couple had a bit of a tumultuous past. Both had been arrested on domestic violence charges against one another, but they always seemed to get back together. On this night, the two were drinking. But what happened next is almost inexplicable. George got inside of a suitcase that was then zipped shut. Why and exactly how he got into that suitcase is not 100% clear. But what is clear is that at one point, he wanted to get out. He pleaded with Sarah to open the suitcase, but she refused. Instead, she turned on the video camera on her phone and started to record as George begged for his life. Still, she refused to unzip the suitcase. Then, the following morning, she eventually called 911. She said she and George were playing hide and seek and George ended up in the suitcase. When police responded, they found George dead. Sarah has been charged with second-degree murder, but now claims she was the victim and is claiming battered spouse syndrome. Tonight, we take a look at the entire cell phone video, the body cam footage, and the interrogation of Sarah Boone to try to figure out how George Torres died in a suitcase.
So then, last week we talked a little bit about what the grounds needed for battered spouse syndrome in Florida were. And in Florida, the legal defense of battered spouse syndrome is typically used in cases where a defendant claims that they were subjected to prolonged abuse and acted in self-defense while committing a violent act, often against their abuser. So the defense can be used to explain the psychological impact of domestic violence and how it affects the actions and perceptions of the battered individual. So basically, to establish battered spouse syndrome in Florida, particularly, you have to have a history of abuse, imminent threat, reasonableness of the response, expert testimony, and then you have the self-defense law. And battered spouse, we've talked about the fact that it's not a standalone defense, so it has to be and needs to be used as part of a self-defense claim in order to justify the defendant's actions. So to succeed for the defense, it depends on the ability to show a pattern of abuse and the defendant's mental state at the time of the incident.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Great to have you with us. Through the years, we've covered lots of cases involving suitcases, lots of crimes. And usually it's the same story to a certain extent over and over again. And that is someone is murdered. They try to dispose of the body, and sometimes they'll dismember the body and put it into a suitcase or suitcases and get rid of them. And a lot of times we cover that story where someone is just.
Now, me personally, I've never heard of anybody getting into a suitcase themselves. Have you guys?
Going along and they find a suitcase and they open it up and there are body parts inside of it. And now all of a sudden we know we've got a murder investigation that started. Lots of stories, lots of cases like this. You've seen it. You've heard it a million times, probably for court TV viewers.
I haven't.
The
and
one
I
that
watch
always
court
comes
TV
to
a lot.
mind was a legendary case, a legendary trial out of New Jersey. Melanie McGuire was the defendant's name. She was a fertility nurse who, ironically, was having an affair with the fertility doctor at the office. Was married to a man named Bill. Bill disappeared. Then his remains were found in a series of suitcases down near the Potomac.
He didn't put himself in.
And Melanie McGuire was the one who was tried and convicted of that murder. And I remember.
Okay, that's what I meant. I meant that. I guess I should have stated it like that. Yeah, I meant that I've never seen anybody actually put themselves in a suitcase or play hide and go seek.
One piece of evidence in that case was they believed that she dismembered her husband in the bathroom in the home. And they went to the home and they didn't find anything in the shower. They were looking for DNA. And it was the cleanest shower in the world. Not a spot of anything. Had been bleached and cleaned so well that it was incriminating evidence against her that she had cleaned up the scene of this gruesome dismemberment. Melanie McGuire was convicted. Now, the story we're talking about tonight involving Sarah Boone and George Torres is a much different case, a much different suitcase case. Here, the suitcase is not used to dispose of the victim. The suitcase is the instrument of death. The suitcase is what is used to commit this murder, according to prosecutors. We've never, ever seen a case like this. First time. And there's a lot of questions surrounding this, obviously, like how and why did George Torres end up in that suitcase? What?
Okay, so we've talked about already just a little bit that the battered spouse syndrome is what she's claiming and that it cannot stand alone. So they've got to be claiming some sort of a self-defense as well. And in the context of using battered spouse syndrome, you have to have evidence of prior bad acts. And that's what they did the first day of the trial, was they were trying to prove some of the evidence of prior bad acts committed by the abuser. And that, you know, they're trying to establish like the physical abuse, the emotional or psychological abuse that she went through. I did hear them mention even sexual abuse, threats of violence, the controlling of resources and isolation can be used, stalking and surveillance, substance abuse or mental health issues of the abuser. And in Florida, the admissibility of prior bad acts is governed by certain rules of evidence, specifically, and we saw them mention the statute section 90.404 that allows evidence of prior acts if it helps establish a pattern or a motive, such as ongoing abuse. The relevance, the prior bad acts must be directly relevant to the defendant's claim of being under threat or fear of harm. And then you have the prejudice versus the probative value, and that's that the court will balance the probative value of this evidence against the risk of unfair prejudice to the accused. So that type of evidence strengthens the defense, actually, by painting like a whole picture of what type of relationships and the kind of dynamics, and it helps the jurors understand the defendant's mental state leading up to the incident. It helps justify the self-defense argument by showing that the defendant reasonably believed that they were in danger due to a pattern of violent behavior.
What was going on in that house? How did he end up in there? And you know, he can't tell us because he's dead. She has given many statements. But the part of this investigation that turned everything upside down, well, she had her story about what was happening that night. We're playing hide and seek, and she helped him get in the suitcase. Well, that's not how hide and seek works, first of all. It doesn't work that way. You close your eyes, someone hides, you got to find them. You don't help them hide. So from the beginning, that just sounded ridiculous. But she recorded him on her cell phone. She recorded video of him pleading for his life. And tonight, we're We're going to show you the whole video. Show you the whole thing.
Anybody watching the trial already has probably seen the videos before this, but if you haven't, it's definitely a trigger warning. He's definitely in the suitcase, and there's that. So it's definitely a trigger warning. See if we can get through that video before the testimony starts this morning.
That investigators got from her cell phone pretty quickly, as a matter of fact. Now, I'm going to warn you. We're going to show it to you, but this is not easy to watch because you know eventually this man dies inside that suitcase. But you'll hear his voice, you'll hear her voice as she's talking to him, and she sounds obviously under the influence of something. She claims they'd been drinking wine that night.
So this interview, or sorry, this particular I'm sorry. I was trying to read this right here where it says 70s show star Danny Masterson guilty, and remembering that this is a year ago. That's what I was trying to say. This court TV episode was a year ago.
Believe out of her mouth. But again, I'm going to warn you, this is not easy to watch. If there's young kids in the room, probably want to get them out at this point. And if you don't want to see it, I can understand. You could turn down the volume, turn away for a few minutes, because she rolled on it. Not for like 10 seconds, not for like 15, like 2 minutes of video, more than 2 minutes of video. Now, what you have to think about as you're watching this video is that this is just what she recorded. He was in there for hours and hours, all night long.
We heard testimony on the first day from the neighbors, and both of them heard the thud coming from the top of the stairs over their bedrooms in the apartment next door, all the way down to what they thought would have been the bottom of the stairs, and so that the thud was so hard that it shook their entire bedroom walls. The walls were thin. Astonishing.
How much did he suffer? What was he thinking? How much was he fighting to try to get out of the suitcase? And what's going through his mind knowing that there's someone outside who could easily unzip the suitcase and let him out? So again, I'm going to play the video for you now. I've given you the warning. George Torres is inside this suitcase. Sarah Boone, the defendant, has the cell phone in her hand and is recording it and is talking/taunting him while he is begging and pleading for her to just unzip the suitcase. Let's watch.
Sarah. For everything you've done to me. Sarah.
This was the opening statement. This is what he used. He verbalized this very video. It was very telling.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
Stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
Sarah. I can't breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
Sarah. 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 Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
That's on you.
Sarah.
Real or ransom. I want to get video for it extra.
What did she say? Do we know? I wonder if it's Gives us a little.
That's when you do when you choke me.
Sarah. 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 Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Sarah.
Real or ransom. Might want to get video for it extra. Because I got this.
Sarah.
Real or ransom.
Sarah.
I can't decipher what she's saying. Can you?
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
Oh. That's what I feel like when you drink on me.
Sarah.
You.
Breathe, Sarah.
Yeah. You should probably shut the up.
Sarah.
Now that's just over 2 minutes of the video. That's just 2 minutes. But you can tell he's already in distress and he knows that something bad is happening here. This is not good. And she's laughing, she's taunting him as all this is going on. This is cruel. Now, there's a second video that she made. It's shorter and it's recorded 11 minutes later. Which means, okay, so we watched just over 2 minutes there, another 11 minutes inside the suitcase, and then she decides to record some more. And you'll notice in this one, he's not talking as much. Again, same warning. Let's take a look.
Sarah.
I've heard her say that she's left place for him to get two little fingers out, and I'm not seeing it on anywhere that we can particularly see where he might be able to get two little fingers out, even.
And there you can see the suitcase was in a different position. She admits she flipped it on its side. I mean, she's not only taunting him, she's like flipping the suitcase around. What is this? What is this? Well, this trial's coming up this summer. You'll see it on Court TV.
3 weeks ago, he did it again. It was a little different because it's already been a year past this last one. So let's see here.
I'm Vinny Politan. The subject of my investigation is Sarah Boone and the Suitcase murder trial. Now, I've covered several murders involving suitcases. In all those situations, the suitcase was used to dispose of dismembered body parts. This case is different. Here, the suitcase is alleged to be the actual murder weapon. Here's the story. February 24th, 2020, Sarah Boone and her boyfriend, George Torres, were spending an evening together at Sarah's home. The couple had a bit of a tumultuous past. Both had been arrested on domestic violence charges, but they always seemed to get back together. On this night, the two were drinking. But what happened next is almost inexplicable. George got inside of a suitcase that was then zipped shut. Why and exactly how he got into the suitcase is not 100% clear. But what is clear is that at one point, he wanted to get out. He pleaded with Sarah to open the suitcase, but she refused. Instead, she turned on the video camera on her phone and started to record.
If you've watched the interrogation video, she really was surprised. I don't think that she remembered that she had done that. The recording. I'm sure that'll come out in court as well. But yeah, apparently she didn't remember that she had recorded that video. Let me peek over here. It is 8:24 Central. Judge Kranick is still back in chambers. Still nothing happening. So that's the breaking news from the Court Insider currently. So we'll just keep on going a little while longer till we get notice that that court is starting.
As George begged for his life, still she refused to unzip the suitcase. Then the following morning, she eventually called 911. She said she and George were playing hide and seek, and George ended up in the suitcase. When police responded,
We also know now, per court testimony, that the ex-husband, well, and per the body cam, that the ex-husband showed up before the police were called. And that in between her calling him the first time, the second time, and the third time they spoke, he told her all three of those times to call the police, and she did not do so until he got to the apartments.
found George dead. Sarah has been charged with second-degree murder, but now she claims she was the victim and is claiming battered spouse syndrome. What happened inside that apartment, and why was George in that suitcase?
We've been talking about this story for quite some time. The public reaction is strong, and it always comes back to that image. And I'm going to show you that image right now, so I wanted to warn you. Some people find this difficult to watch, but it's the video that Sarah Boone, the first video that Sarah Boone recorded. And you'll see the suitcase. You'll hear George Torres's voice. He's inside that suit. Joining me, Court TV digital content producer who's been covering this story inside and out. Lauren Silver is with us, and forensic pathologist Dr. Priya Banerjee. Thank you both for being here. Lauren, I'll begin with you, and I want to put this up on the screen. We have somewhat of a timeline here of what's going on, but I want you to kind of fill in the blanks. It seems that he's in the suitcase by 11:12 or so.
First video began recording on February 24th at 23:12, approximately 0030 hours. Sarah decided she was going to go upstairs, laid down in her bed and fell asleep approximately 20 to 30 minutes after. Sarah said she went downstairs at approximately 1100 hours and realized she could not find Jorge anywhere or George anywhere. Sarah unzipped the suitcase and found George unresponsive.
He's in the suitcase still. There are multiple domestic violence incidents.
You two hitting each other.
Sarah.
This morning, the word up.
He told you, Sarah, I can't breathe.
George Torres locked inside of a suitcase, begging for help.
I thought he was okay.
The Suitcase Murder Trial. Live coverage starting October 7th on Court TV.
So we've been watching.
We have a puzzle that we started in there. Okay. We've been doing art, trying to take stuff off the wall to make new art put up there, like having a good time with one another. But we're drinking. We had a bottle of wine last night. Okay. So then it's like, we decided to play hide and seek, right? Okay. So he gets in the suitcase. The problem is I fell asleep. When did you do CPR? This morning. When I found it. Before you called? Yes. 1 o'clock right now. I was awake, but I actually got out of the bed at like 12:30ish. So I came downstairs, and I was like, oh, he's in the suitcase still. That's when I found him. I took him out, tried doing CPR, and then I called him, and then I called you guys. And I fell asleep. I don't know if he suffocated or like had an aneurysm or a heart attack or what.
What kind of medical conditions did he have?
None that I know of.
Nothing that you know of.
None
Did
that
you
I
take
know
any
of.
medical?
No. All we had was a bottle of wine.
12 hours locked inside of a suitcase. It's not going to be an aneurysm that's going to take your life. So I wanted to, I said there's more than one video. There's 2 videos. The second one's a little bit shorter, but I want to show you the second video as
Pretty much they're going over everything that we've talked about so far.
And tumultuous relationship filled with accusations.
It's kind of a lot of repeats as far as Benny just talking to different people and different people that might have some idea of what happened and when and where. And let's check over here, see what it says. Your gavels, Tamara Burton, Your Honor. Court TV saying he's still in chambers back there, so we'll just keep going a little while longer.
Frank Bankowitz. So thank you both for being here. I do appreciate it. So I wanted to point out a couple of scenarios here and kind of get your take on it. And I'll begin with Sarah Boone talking about when she woke up. In one statement, Sarah woke up to her cell phone ringing multiple times around 1100 hours. This is in a police statement. She went downstairs, did not see George anywhere in the apartment. She then realized.
And we know now by the ex-husband's testimony that the phone ringing the multiple times around 1100 hours was him checking in to see if she was indeed going to pick up their son that day.
That he was possibly still inside the suitcase. Sarah unzipped the suitcase and found George unresponsive and not breathing. However, on the body cam video, I want to play that so we can see if it's consistent with that version.
When did you do CPR? This morning, when I found it. Before you called? Yes! I'm on a clock right now. I tried. I was awake, but I actually got out of the bed at like 12:30ish, whatever.
Okay, so James, is there a problem here in when she's getting up, or is this story consistent, at least this part, of when she gets up the following morning?
Thanks for having me, Vinny. I don't think she had a watch on every time they're asking her questions about the times. I'm guessing, trying to give them an answer.
So we know that this is James Owens, that's Sarah Boone's new attorney, her 9th attorney, and he was the one that she got after she put out the little cute ad for a pro bono lawyer.
So I don't think she should be looked down upon or considered that she's being evasive. I just think she didn't know the time frame.
Frank, from your perspective, is there a problem with her story, or is it something that is consistent enough for a jury to say, hey, every time she's telling the story, she's telling the same story about what happened that morning?
Well, I don't know that you can point to inconsistencies. I think it's, she's nervous, she's upset. She's basically kind of in a panic mode from what I see in the video and what I've seen in the past. And I don't know that you can point to those as being inconsistencies.
I want to show go to another issue here, which is the state of mind that night and what was happening. First, Sarah mentioned that she and George had been consuming alcohol during the night, and she went upstairs and passed out in her bed. But here she is in her interview talking about the same issue of drinking that night.
You told me but you told me on recording, like, that you were not drunk, he was not drunk, you guys were having a good time.
I can't get drunk. Number one, I do not want to get drunk. I don't like being non-complimentous, having my wits about myself. I don't like feeling out of control.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and they brought that up in court. Let me pull that up and remember what it was she said there. And it's funny that she mentioned the word non-compos mentis. Apparently. Non-compos mentis. It's a Latin legal term meaning not of sound mind. Excuse me. It refers to a person who is unable to handle their own affairs or understand the nature and consequences of their actions due to mental illness, insanity, or other severe cognitive impairment. The term is used in legal context when determining whether someone is competent to stand trial or make legal decisions or enter into contracts. If a person is declared non-compos mentis, then they may be excused from certain legal responsibilities for certain actions, such as committing a crime or signing a legal document, because they were mentally incapable of understanding what they were doing at that time. In criminal cases, a defendant found to be non-compos mentis may be deemed incompetent to stand trial or could raise an insanity defense, arguing that the lack of the mental capacity to form criminal intent, which they obviously did not find in her. So let's listen to her say that again.
At night and what was happening. First, Sarah mentioned that she and George had been consuming alcohol during the night, and she went upstairs and passed out in her bed. But here she is in her interview talking about the same issue of drinking that night.
You told me but you told me on recording, like, that you were not drunk, he was not drunk, you guys were having a good time.
I can't get drunk. Number one, I do not want to get drunk. I don't like being non-compos mentis, having my wits about myself. I don't like feeling out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm just saying, you're making it sound like he's a raging alcoholic today, and yesterday I was kind of asking you those questions, and you're like a little defensive, like, no, we're not alcoholics. We are not, but you guys were both sober on Sunday, to your knowledge, because when I said you went and passed out, you were like, no, I didn't pass out, I just fell asleep. So now it's kind of like, what is it? Were you guys drinking and it got out of hand and it got physical?
No.
Or is it?
Sunday was one of the better days that we have had in quite some time.
So where were you guys at on drunkenness, not drunkenness on Sunday? You told us you weren't drunk.
No, I was not drunk.
Right.
I was not drunk.
But before, I mean, in the last week, we have heard that she has since changed her story and said that she was indeed intoxicated during the time of the crime and possibly still intoxicated up to the next day when the police showed up.
Okay, James, from the beginning of my coverage of the story, that's always been a big issue because you listen to the voice, it sounds like she's under the influence. Is this a problem? The fact that she seems to be denying that they were drinking, denying that she was drunk, or was she actually sober that night?
No, I think they were drinking, and I think that earlier in the day, she to the Publix, which is a short distance away from their apartment. And then later on the day, he went a second time to Publix and got another bottle. So both of those and found in the garbage can, and the receipts were found somewhere in the apartment. So they were the only in the apartment that night. So they both consumed.
Then we also saw that evidence the first day of trial that the 3 receipts from Publix and the 2 big bottles of 1.5 liters, I believe, of wine were in the trash and then brought to court for evidence.
So they did drink quite a bit.
Frank Mankiewicz, let me ask you about that issue of the drinking. Is that a huge problem for Sarah Boone that they were drinking, or how does this play in front of a jury, and what does it mean?
Well, I would agree with Mr. Owens. They were drinking a lot. They consumed 2 full bottles of wine. They finished one and went out and bought a second and finished it. Whether in her mind at that point in time she can establish whether she was drunk or not, I think that's going to be a question for the jury. And they're going to have to look at all these tapes and look at the actual facts as to what she did, where she had gone, and the fact that she, quote, fell asleep, to me is consistent with being passed out. But that's to me. Fortunately, I don't have to deal with that. Mr. Owens does.
Mr. Owens, number 9, will be representing Sarah Boone at the trial. This is a big one now. I think this is probably the biggest one if there is an inconsistency. From the beginning, it seems that Sarah was talking about playing a game of hide and seek, that George willingly got into the suitcase. Sarah zipped the suitcase up, and they were both laughing as she zipped him into the suitcase. But now I want to play the last time, James, you were in court talking about what Sarah's defense is going to be in this case.
Judge, the state doesn't know what happened the 2 minutes prior, or the minutes leading up to, the time leading up to the 2-minute video. The state doesn't know what happened after the 2-minute video. Only Sarah Boone can testify to that.
Generally from the beginning, he seems like not necessarily overly aggressive, but when you're not confident enough, when you're talking to somebody, your voice raises or your heart starts beating faster and you appear angry to other people. That's what he seems like to me.
That's for her to testify to.
The appellant has not cited, nor is our research located, any Florida case holding that evidence of battered spouse syndrome is admissible where the defendant claims accident rather than self-defense.
Who claims accident?
Are you claiming self-defense?
Yes.
Well, that's the first time that I've heard that.
Judge, I just mentioned it a while ago.
The word self-defense never came out of your mouth.
Judge,
words that you believe that the state's position is, what you believe that they're going to try to establish, that we don't know what happened before and after that video. The word self-defense have never been uttered this afternoon.
Judge, for the record, we're claiming self-defense. We're utilizing the battered spouse syndrome in conjunction with that defense.
Okay. All right.
Not accident, as they want to allege.
Okay.
Okay, James, let me ask you, if they're laughing, if she says they're laughing when she zipped him in, how does that equal self-defense? Is that inconsistent?
Well, like I said in court, the video is only 2 minutes long that Sarah recorded of George in the suitcase. So no one but Sarah knows what happened prior to recorded, and no one but Sarah knows what happened turned off the video.
So what they were saying in court is his basic defense is all it's all centered around what happened between the first 2.5 minute video, the 11 minutes in between, and then the second video that she recorded, on that being the place where she felt like she was in imminent danger.
So, or to testify to and explain what happened.
All right, James Owens and Frank Bankowitz staying with us. Still to come. Was there a history of domestic violence?
Sometimes I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid of his family.
That's what you get when you choke me. It brings me to my next question, which I think will be a major issue in this case. Was there a history of domestic violence? Sarah Boone, George Torres. Still with me, Sarah Boone, new attorney James Owens, and
Like we said, in order for her to pass through the battered spouse syndrome defense, she'll have to prove prior domestic violence as well.
her former attorney, Frank Bankowitz. Before we talk about this, I want to show one more video from another domestic violence incident. This one's from September 4th of 2019.
George was hiding in the bathtub upstairs. Okay?
Yes.
So, he gave me his side of things. I need you to give me your side of things in person right here. And we kind of talked on the phone, but I need you to tell me what happened tonight. So what happened?
Okay, well, pardon my language, because it's not me. I was called a
Okay.
and I'm not a mother to my son.
Okay.
All the while, nonetheless, I was sleeping before that.
Okay. So you're woken up to him calling you names. So you're saying?
I thought that I'm like, feed the beast. Go outside and smoke a cigarette with him.
Okay.
Try to calm things. Well, the whole time I was there saying nothing. Nothing. I was called names.
Okay. So you guys are smoking a cigarette, and he was calling you names, being verbally aggressive with you. Verbally abusive.
Before that, where I'm like, I don't want to get hit anymore. So I'm just going to go downstairs and smoke a cigarette with him to try to calm him down.
Okay. So you're saying, okay, I'm trying to get a timeline of things. So start from the beginning and give me the timeline.
Was that I was asleep?
I don't, not literal time, but in a reference of incident, how they occurred tonight.
I was asleep, and again, he comes in and wakes me up.
He wakes you up. Okay.
He's out of sorts.
Okay.
So I'm trying to figure things out.
Okay.
Where it's like, don't make it worse. Just go downstairs with him. Because he gets mad at me because I go to sleep.
Okay.
I go downstairs, smoke a cigarette. The whole time I'm being belittled.
Okay.
Pardon me for saying talk about.
Okay, Frank Bankowitz, is there a history of domestic violence in this relationship? And if so, how serious?
Somebody calling you names is not domestic violence. Well, let me rephrase. That was a dumb statement. That's not what I meant. Let me just scratch that. That's not what I meant. I'll clarify in a little bit.
Absolutely. There's a long history of domestic violence, and I'm sure all of that's going to come out or has already come out with regard to the battered spouse defense. That's one of the principal elements is to establish a history of abuse. And there was a long history of abuse in this case, history of hospitalizations, history of broken bones, history of arrests. It's a classic situation of battered spouse syndrome, in my opinion.
I want to put this up on the screen. Sarah stated, this is June 15th, 2019. She was beaten up, face, head, legs, and arms. She stated that she begged George to stop, and George stated, "You're going to die." Sarah stated that George punched her in the head, flung her off the bed. Sarah stated this incident.
Okay, so he's reading just the small part of it. So this looks to be June 15, 2019. The deputy responded. That's when we saw that's the one we just saw. Yeah. She was so confused too. Beaten up, but she didn't look like she was beaten up. I can't attest to the dark video, but Sarah stated that she has been dating George for 2.5 years. I observed a lump that was red in color on the left side of Sarah's face under her hairline. She also had scratches on the right side of her neck. Sarah stated the lump was caused by George punching her. She was not sure if the scratches were from today. Sarah provided a sworn written statement. She desires prosecution and will testify in court. Sarah completed a domestic violence worksheet and was provided a victim's right pamphlet. I then spoke with George. I observed scratches on the right side of George's neck. I asked George how he received the scratches. George stated that he did not know. He did say at the beginning of the video that he did find George hiding in the bathtub upstairs. I then secured George into handcuffs without incident and placed him in the back of my vehicle. I then read him his Miranda rights from my issued Miranda warnings card. George agreed to speak with me. He stated that he did not strike Sarah and that Sarah did not strike him. I took photos of both Sarah and George's injuries and uploaded them into DataWorks. Both refused medical attention due to Sarah and George being involved in a dating relationship for 2.5 years and George striking Sarah, causing visible injuries. I placed George under arrest for domestic violence under the Florida statute. My body-worn camera was activated. No further information at this time. Let's go check on Court TV. What they got going on? Nothing yet? Any update? It is 8:45 Central. Not sure what's going on. Started 50 minutes ago. I'm pretty sure there's some sort of delay, but it doesn't say why. Or maybe, was it 9 o'clock Central? No. All right, let's get back over here until. Oh, it looks like people are coming out of chambers actually. It may actually be getting started. Oh, there's Sarah.
Judge, can the parties approach the bench?
As soon as Madam Clerk calls it, we can do that.
Oh, look at those pink handcuffs. Pink handcuffs. Pink chains.
Good morning, ma'am. Can you state your full name and date of birth? And a white multicolored shirt, looks like some splotching on it. She is in custody. However, she's not wearing any restraints. So we will be standing when our jury panel enters and exits. The parties may approach.
She got the mascara on this morning like she did the other day. We're going to take a minute and do the last 4 or 5 minutes of this in case we have to do what we did the other day and put on closed captioning for the really, really horrible microphone. So let's finish this up and then we'll go right back to court.
So yes, there cooperation in terms of a prior history of George and emotionally and sexually abusing Sarah Boone.
And I'm looking here at George's arrest history. It looks like June 15th, arrested for battery. June 18th, arrested for violation of pretrial release, making contact with Sarah when he wasn't supposed to. August 28th, 2019, a battery arrest. September 4th, arrested for battery. Is all of this connected to Sarah, or are there other cases that are out there? And do you expect the jury to hear the history of George Torres, James?
Yes, I believe those instances relate to the domestic George and Sarah. And I believe there is other incidences as far as how much comes in. You know, there are rules that come into play in the evidence.
Okay.
I have to make some decisions about.
Oh my gosh, you got a horrible microphone.
James, I hate to cut you off, but we are out of time. James Owens, we appreciate it. Frank Bankowitz, thank you both so much. You know,
Vinny is constantly shutting people down on stream. Sorry, I hate to cut you off, but we are out of time. Okay, so looks like we've got a few minutes. They've got a few minutes ahead of us here. And I want to do that, like I said, just basically in case we have to do what we did on Friday and turn on the closed captions. We already went over a synopsis this morning, and the key developments in the case, the video evidence, the defense's argument about the accident, the prosecution focusing on her behavior in the video, and the battered spouse syndrome, the testimony that goes along with that. I did.
Right, State, anything we need to address before we bring in our panel this morning?
Not from the state.
Defense.
No, sir.
All right. Ms. Boone, just a couple of questions before we bring in our panel this morning. Are you still satisfied with your lawyer's representation of you in this matter?
Very much so.
And are you still on board with the strategy that they are utilizing in your defense?
Yes.
All right, very good. Let's go ahead and stand and bring in our panel.
Panel, aka jurors. So the witness testimony in Sarah Boone's trial so far is focused on events that are leading up to George's passing and her behavior afterwards. So while the trial is still ongoing, the key witnesses so far have been first responders. It's the EMT and the police who arrived at the scene after Boone called 911. They testified about the condition of Torres's body and Boone's behavior when they arrived. The testimony was crucial in establishing the timeline and Boone's reactions afterwards. The medical examiner, the medical expert testified about the cause of Torres's passing, which was determined to be asphyxiation. The expert testimony critical for establishing whether the death was an accident or if it involved foul play. Investigators testified that the interviews with Boone, as well as the analysis of the video footage from her phone, detectives have detailed Boone's shifting explanations about what happened that same night of the incident. And then they have friends and neighbors or individuals familiar with Boone and Torres were provided insight, including any history of arguments, prior incidents of domestic disputes, and testimony that might establish a pattern of behavior. So testimony from witnesses about Boone's interaction with law enforcement, her demeanor, and the evidence recovered from the scene is what seems to be shaping the narrative so far in court.
Jury entering.
State, do you recognize our jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, do you recognize our jury? Yes. All right, everyone can be seated. Members of the jury, good morning. Welcome back to 12 Alpha of the Orange County Courthouse. I hope that you all had a restful weekend and enjoyed your time with your loved ones, your friends, and your family. Just if you could, I gave you a long instruction on Friday before we broke. If you could please confirm that you complied with the court's instructions by raising your hand at this time. Record reflect that all members of our panel have raised their hands. Now, members of the jury, I know the line to get in this morning was quite long. So the lawyers have reminded me that on the right side of the entrance of the courthouse is a jury-only line. So if you can make your way all the way to the far right side of the entrance, there's a jury-only line. Yes, sir. Juror number 2 in the back. Huh? It was still quite long? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to bring that to your attention if you did not know. Obviously, if you're stuck, we're waiting on you. So don't feel anxiety or anything if you're stuck in that line. We can't start till you all get here. And I appreciate, again, your sacrifice and your attentiveness in this process. With that, State, you can call your next witness.
State will call Dr. Sarah Zadovich.
Swear or affirm that the testimony you should give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes, thank you.
Good morning, doctor. Could you please state and spell your name for the record for us?
Sarah Zadovich, Sarazydowicz.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
Can you tell us what do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic pathologist.
And who do you work for?
I work for Orange County. We cover Orange County and Osceola County.
And how long have you been a forensic pathologist?
I've been at this office for about 12 years and then 1 year in Tampa, so about 13 years.
And what type of educational background do you have to be a forensic pathologist?
So I have a bachelor's degree in kinesiology from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I went to medical school in Kansas City, Missouri. After that, I went to Cleveland, Ohio to do a 1-year rotating clinical internship. After that, I went back to the University of Wisconsin. I did my residency in anatomic pathology and clinical pathology. I have 2 fellowships or subspecialty training. One is in cytopathology from Northwestern University in Chicago. And then I did my forensic pathology fellowship in Tampa.
Is continuing education something that you must maintain in order to hold this position?
Yes, I have to do continuing education for my board certifications, which is in anatomic pathology, clinical pathology, and forensic pathology. And I also have to do separate continuing medical education to maintain my medical license for the state of Florida.
So tell us, what are your duties as a medical examiner?
So we're involved in what's called the medical legal investigation of deaths. And that just means that we investigate certain types of deaths. And there's a Florida statute or a Florida law that states which types of deaths that we'll be involved in investigating. And in general, they're deaths that are not natural. So accidents, suicides, homicides, or deaths that are natural but maybe unexpected. Those are the types of cases that we're involved in. And again, that Florida statute lays out exactly which types of cases that we'll be involved in. And the reason we're involved in that is our goal is to determine cause of death and manner of death in those individuals that we're investigating.
Could you tell us what an autopsy is, generally speaking?
So an autopsy is also called a postmortem or after death examination. And there are kind of 2 main parts to it. The first part is what's called an external examination, which is just as it sounds. So that's making observations about an individual. So hair color, eye color, height, any sort of unique markings like scars or tattoos. And at that time, we're also looking for any external signs of diseases or injuries. After that, we go to what's called the internal examination. So that means that we open the body cavities, we remove all of the organs and dissect all of the organs. And again, as we're doing that, we're looking for any signs of diseases or injuries that might help explain why that person died. And we can also add ancillary tests or other tests. So things like toxicology, microbiology. It's a little bit dependent on each case, but we have options for other testing as well.
Can you tell us what is the cause and manner of death? And is this something that you document?
So, cause of death is either a disease or an injury that ultimately results in an individual's death. Right? So, it's very individual and unique to that individual. Manner of death is a way to categorize or group similar types of deaths together. And for manner of death, there's only 5 choices. So, there would be natural, accident, suicide, homicide, or undetermined. So, those are the manners of death.
In your career, approximately how many autopsies have you performed?
Around 3,000.
And have you previously testified as an expert witness in court?
Yes.
How many times?
Between 75 to 80.
And in what areas have you testified as an expert witness?
Forensic pathology.
Turning our attention to this case, did you perform the autopsy?
Yes.
And what were your findings as to cause and manner of death?
So the cause of death, which I put on the death certificate, is positional asphyxia with environmental suffocation. And the manner of death I classified as homicide.
Now, when you perform your autopsy, what information do you have at the time that you begin that examination?
It's incredibly variable. I can have a lot of background information.
So just for reference purposes, positional asphyxia occurs when a person's body position prevents them from breathing adequately. It's associated with cases where an individual is placed in a position